A very warm welcome back. You're watching Money Live. Digital banking goes digital. It's great to have you with us today, wherever you are in the world. Like we're here for our first Leaders Forum covering all things open APIs, as well as strategies for success in today's very rapidly evolving landscape. Let's meet our fantastic panelists. First of all, we have Caroline Ambrose. Hello, Caroline.
Good morning, Lindley. Morning, everyone.
Morning, everybody. Caroline is Open Banking Implementation Director at Barclays UK. Wonderful to have you with us today. Next up, we have Matt Collinge. Hello, Matt.
Hi, everyone.
Matt is Chief Technology Officer at Curve. Great to have you with us with, I believe, a Curve hat on.
Indeed.
There we go. There's the logo. Marion King. Hello, Marion.
Hello, everyone, and good morning.
Where do we find you today?
In Bedfordshire. Very cloudy Bedfordshire.
How lovely. Hope the weather's nice. Director of Payments at NatWest. Great to have you with us. Next up, we have Karthik TS. Hello, Karthik.
Hello, hi there.
And you are further afield. Where are you today? I believe you're in Bangalore today.
Yes, I'm in Bangalore, yes.
Very good. Karthik is head of the Centre of Excellence at Torrey Harris Integration Solutions. Great to have you here. And last but not least, we have Kevin Mountford. Hello, Kevin.
Looking forward to the next couple of days.
Should be really good. So far, so good. Kevin is the co-founder of Raisin. Wonderful to have you all with us today. Okay, we have lots to cover, and I'm sure that you have your own questions and comments for us. So send them in throughout the discussion, as always, using the live Q&A box on your right. We'll get to as many as we can in the final part of our discussion. Don't forget, you can also join us live to ask your question face to face. Just let us know that you want to do that by starting your question with the word Zoom. Okay, but we'd love to see you face to face. Please get involved, get on camera with us. This is a wave session. Now that means that right after the discussion, you can go into a 30-minute speed networking session where you can continue the conversation on a one-to-one basis with 6 people for 5 minutes apiece. Now that'll be really interesting and exactly the way we would do it probably in the real world, possibly even faster. If you want to take part, at the end of the discussion, stay on this page, simply scroll down to the bottom of the page and follow the instructions there. So please do, and but let's get cracking, shall we? Let's look at the state of play with open banking at the moment. Caroline, first of all, let's begin by thinking about the foundations. What API innovations do you think have been transformative in the world to date?
Yeah, thank you, Lindley. I think before I jump into that, probably worth saying I actually think open banking APIs has been transformative in and of itself. And what do I mean by that? So historically, customers who wanted to share their data or make payments have had to use screen scraping. And what that means is they have to hand over those kind of secret credentials that they hold dear to their heart, and we've spent years telling them to hold dear to their heart. And that for many consumers has meant that people haven't engaged with the concept of sharing their financial data. So I think through the introduction of APIs, first and foremost, we will see much more customer adoption and use, and that's got to be a good bedrock in terms of innovation.
Yeah.
And then in terms of specific innovations, really excited to see some of the products out there that are helping customers, particularly in financial difficulty. There's a lovely tool called Tully, which helps customers arrange their finances and really break down what are the barriers to effectively helping them become more financially safe. Likewise, loads of innovation in terms of lending products, kind of challenging the historic way that we've used data to help customers work out what they can borrow and what they can't borrow. And then if I turn to the SME segment, lots of continued innovation. It's probably the segment where customers have been used to sharing their data for things like accountancy software, but we're seeing even more in terms of innovation in that space. And then finally, not quite the biggest area, but payments is definitely coming. So open banking payments, I think through the next kind of 12 to 18 months, we'll see a real shift from people using card-based payments instruments and starting to use the open banking rails.
Yeah.
Really exciting stuff in this world right now.
It does seem to be a huge emerging area right now. Everyone's talking about it, and it's really important to customers as well. From customer point of view, I suppose in some ways, we haven't chipped away at the iceberg too much. We've used a useful app that can show us all of our accounts. That's all very good, but it's the iceberg is still yet to be revealed. Karthik, what do you think about the transformation so far? Lots to come.
Yeah, I think what API-driven transformation has led to is creation of digital marketplaces. And I'd like to share a story right from home, India. Bank of Baroda, a well-known name in the Indian market, has launched a digital marketplace for farmers targeting the agricultural sector. So as you know, in India, agriculture is a very big thing. And what it has made possible is it is partnered with equipment providers, weather providers, soil quality providers, and they've onboarded them into the platform. And it's the value proposition given to farmers. And what's important to note is a bank has gone ahead and picked up an area that is not of the bank. And what it enables bank to do is to leverage the brand they have, leverage the trust they have in the market. And they also use this as a means to target increase in their core offerings. And as a result, they're also adding huge value to the customer segment, in this case, the farmer segment. And it's a win-win situation both for banks and the farmers. So this is what I believe is most transformative, as it changes the lives of the customers and the banks themselves.
Yeah, and what's wonderful about this example is we're not talking about farmer as in pharmaceuticals. We're talking about farmers, people on the land, who have been using these systems and these services in immediately in great numbers. Absolutely fascinating. But Kevin, COVID-19 has clearly had a very big impact. Do you think it will impact the way innovations come through into the market? Let's have your microphone on there, Peter, if we can't hear it already. I think you're quite quiet for us. There we go. Let's try again. Are you there? We'll come back to you in a second, Kevin. We'll come back to you in a second because I can't actually hear you at the moment. Here we go. Right. So, anyone else? Can I throw it to Matt for a second? Do you think there'll be an impact from COVID?
Well, I think COVID is focusing the minds in terms of people using branch networks is sort of not even possible or very, very hard to do. I think there's going to be a spate of innovation off the back of this crisis.
Yeah. Let's go back to you, Kevin. Are you with us? Can you hear us? You probably hear us. Can we hear you?
Yeah, I
got
can
you.
hear you clear. You hear me? Yeah.
Yeah, got you. So what do you think about the impact of COVID-19? Do you think it's going to steer innovations in a new direction? I mean, look, innovations have included things like the way that we help customers, the way that customers interact with us. This has been a huge set of innovations in many ways.
Yeah, and I think the kind of pace of change maybe has gone beyond what anybody ever imagined when we entered into this crisis. I think on one hand, some of the deadlines that have been set by the regulators may get moved, and that in theory could slow some things down, but it also allows organizations to be better prepared. I think the main thing is we've seen an adoption of new ways of working by consumers. And I think throughout the presentations this morning, that was very clear. I think people are becoming more digitally savvy the way now that
we're losing you there, Kevin, just very slightly. I think you were talking about the digitalization and how important that has been to customers.
Yeah, most definitely. And if you think of it from a kind of practical sense, the current crisis means both individuals and companies need quick and easy access to funding. So the new kind of technical environment that we're seeing allows kind of the lenders to understand the data and be able to make decisions far faster than they would have done in the old ways of working.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you took us to customers. Let's look at customer first API strategies. Marion, how important will it be to own but really excel in genuinely helpful customer relationships from now on? We've got to this point with COVID and many years of work. Now I guess it's important not to let that go.
Yeah, it's really, that Excel word is exactly the word. And I think Carlos on his slide had obsession with customer pain points. That's absolutely where we're focused. And just building on the comment of Matt and Kevin there, we've seen, a 70% fall away of cash out of ATMs 95% fall away in branches, as you would expect, but a 70% uplift on a weekly basis in terms of online registrations.
Yeah.
So we can see this dramatic and rapid shift as customers are adjusting to a different set of circumstances.
Yeah.
And API technology, you know, to Caroline's point, is really exciting, and we can do a lot, and we can do a lot quite quickly. So Caroline, you were talking about using, you know, open banking rails to get access. And so NatWest launched Pay It earlier this year, and what that does is provides mainly merchants, but with an alternative to card rails. So what it's doing is offering alternatives where you can exploit maybe cheaper, maybe faster, maybe safer alternatives for your particular business model. So having the customer at the heart of everything we do, building on that trust, because in banking and in financial services, you earn that trust. Where it's no longer dominated by the few, thankfully. There are many, many players out there. And listening to Carlos from BBVA, the idea is to partner with innovators, those who are focused and specialist and can get these things stood up very quickly. And that's the key to focusing on our customers, building on that trust, but dealing with pain points going forward.
He also talked about the mindset and the cultural transformation. That was really important in Carlos's presentation. You know, there's something driving the change, and digital transformation is how it's enacted in many ways, but actually the cultural needs to change as well. Matt, what about personal finance management? Because clearly, you know, in times of uncertainty like this, you know, people are going to be coming with lots of questions and also having some difficulty. You know, how do you think PFM will evolve? What channels do you think are best to handle, you know, what could be a big volume and has been a big volume of requests for advice?
So I think the key is going to be moving from sort of pretty dashboards which show you, how much you've spent within a certain period of time to being able to sort of deliver on the promise of having your money on autopilot and something actually looking after or adding some value to your sort of financial life and removing some of the friction from it. To do that, customers will need to trust the service provider, and if something's going to be making decisions on your behalf, or you're going to be entrusting them to do that, you need to make sure that they've got the mandate to offer that sort of advice. So there's no sort of hidden vested interest or even worse, a sort of suspected vested interest. Yeah. So I think the key thing is being involved in the write side as well as the read side. So not just being able to read in transactions, but also being able to initiate payments. And I think currently that's one of the perhaps sort of undelivered promises of open banking so far is the PIS side. Yeah. And I think that's partly down to the RTS, the regulatory technical standards, which I think were devised by people more on the InfoSec side of the spectrum than the product or UX side. And so, things like VRP or variable recurring payments, when they get sort of mainstream and become part of the CMA9 mandate, then that then will open up the field to sort of true innovation, I think, in the space.
Something else which opens up the field, and Marion was just talking about, was partnerships, and something that Carlos was talking about as well. Caroline, how can banks broaden the services they offer, adapt their APIs with more TPP partnerships in mind?
Yeah, it's a great question, Lindley, and I think we're seeing a lot of it already. So if you look across the board, many partnerships starting to happen. I couldn't list all the partnerships that we're starting to embark on at Barclays, but just as an example, partnering with Flux in terms of making sure that we can share digital receipts, and partnering with a number of lending providers to make sure that we can innovate our lending propositions. So I think actually this has just opened the playing field to more and more partnerships. And I think it's changed the mindset and culture actually within financial services away from we can do everything ourselves to actually how do we really truly listen to customers, understand what they need, and then go out into the market and find those fabulous companies, big or small, who actually can partner with us to provide that to the millions of customers that we serve today. So I think we're seeing it already, but I think we will see significant amounts of growth in terms of that partnership method going forward.
Yeah, and it's not just in terms of the ecosystem, the supply chain, but it's also in terms of the marketplace you operate in. It's a very entrepreneurial thing, Karthik, to look at marketplace models, but they're here. Everyone's talking about value-added services. What advantages do you think, Karthik, that marketplace models do bring to customers who get the services, but also to banks?
Yes, so banks traditionally have been only thinking about moving money from A to B, but what the marketplace business model has made banks to think is to think in terms of industry segments, different industry segments. So for example, the real estate segment. So today, when a customer goes to a bank, they only look at mortgages and loans. Now, banks have the huge opportunity to not just offer these loans, but also offer ecosystem of smart home providers, interior decorators, whatnot, right? So this gives an opportunity for banks to increase their core business, as I said, and also it gives a huge value proposition to the customers to look at banks not just for money, to kind of diversify and increase. So this is also an opportunity for traditional banks to compete with the neo banks and all the disruptors out there. So that way, traditional banks are also seen as innovators in the eyes of the customer, and traditional banks can leverage their brand proposition, their brand value proposition, their reach, their trust, and to capitalize this in this age of crisis.
Absolutely. It's really interesting, isn't it, that, when we talk about data, there are so many different sources available. Kevin, look, we have to look at non-financial data. We have to look at things that perhaps wouldn't necessarily have been possible in previous years. Now they are, but you really have to focus, don't you, Kevin, on the sort of data you're using and how you apply it to the business problems that you have.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine that there are many organisations across all sectors that don't see data as being fundamental to their business. And I think there are already examples of where there is collaboration across sector, really to kind of improve the customer offering. And obviously with the rise of APIs, it's helped to simplify that. I mean, you look at, the way that maybe Amazon works with its merchants, maybe the way that the review sites work with the likes of Google Maps and push localized offers. So I think it's inevitable that collaboration across sector will continue. I think there's increased customer demand for that, and obviously one of the ideas behind the change around open banking, etc., is the regulators are keen to boost competition. So there's no reason that those boundaries can't be extended. I think the important thing though is the data pool does expand. All of the checks and balances have to be put in place. As we've heard today, it's key that the end user has the trust in how the new ecosystems develop.
Yeah. Let's stay with data for a minute before we move into the next section. Matt, the eternal question at the moment is how do you get customers to share their data more? I guess we'll start with trust. We need to start with, the knowing the benefits that there are to me and the control that I can have over my data to make it secure. All those things are in the mix. What else do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it does ultimately boil down to trust and value exchange. So, does the customer customers are a lot more savvy now in terms of understanding their rights and also the risks of sharing their data. So they need to feel that the risk of sharing it is made up with the reward they get back from from the utility of whatever it is that's being provided. So if they think that we or whoever it is that they're sharing their data with is going to use it for the customer's advantage, then it's a no-brainer for them. But it's getting to that point of decision. Yeah. And I think there is customers are also a lot more of the mind that if they tick any box that says I'm going to share my data with carefully selected partners, then they pretty much see through that and see it as a sort of invitation to get sort of maybe low quality inbound emails. So
well, the thing is as well, we're still pretty lazy, and we're still unless you have an extra few seconds, which feel very long, very long seconds, you won't go into the cookie preferences and start to select those things. So there's a way to go for us all as consumers to engage a bit more with the tech that we need to protect ourselves.
Indeed.
Yeah. Lynn, can I just add on the kind of what else is a barrier? I totally agree with Matt that value exchange and trust are absolutely critical. I think we see that time and time again. think it's worth mentioning, though, there is a groundswell of concern about the RCS requirement for 90-day re-authentication and whether that level of friction actually stops consumers engaging. Now I think, ongoing debate and discussion with the regulators about, is that the right thing? Is there a different way of doing it that makes it simple and easy for customers? That, I think, is going to become a kind of key sticking point along with those value exchange and trust elements.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Karthik, just let's talk about the technology for a second. Obviously, and the differences between neobanks and challengers and incumbents. From an IT strategy perspective, it's a very different situation for each of the banks and how mature they are. But how can incumbents start to address the enabling legacy challenge? Start to freshen up? And it is about the system you use, the software you use. It's also about the legacy systems. So how do you start to freshen up the infrastructure?
That's a very interesting point. So if you look at legacy systems, legacy is what has been serving the banks for all these years, and customers are already used to the offerings provided by the legacy. So when it comes to new business models, the incumbent banks and all the traditional banks need to see how to have a kind of coexistence of legacy and the new systems, which are API-enabled, cloud-based modular systems. So this is where integration plays a key role, which is what we as an organization do for a living, to build the required adapters, connectors, and move the data to map the use cases, to help the bank to look at it from an outside-in perspective. So always banks should look at how customer journeys can be mapped to legacy touchpoints. If a touchpoint is not ready to be plugged into journey, how to integrate it, how to connect it, and combine APIs to make it possible. So legacies are here to stay, and it can be done in a phased manner, especially when you have mandates from group organizations to kind of adopt a kind of a shiny new piece of technology. So very important to acknowledge the fact that coexistence is key and integration plays a key role.
Let's move on. Don't forget to submit your own questions to the panel and add the word Zoom to your question if you'd like to ask it live on video. You may not like to ask it live on video, but we would love to see you on our screen here. So if you would like to get in touch and do it face-to-face, just write the word Zoom on your question. Kevin, look, if we think about the major players, incumbents, neobanks, third parties, big tech, who's the most primed, do you think, to be successful? Not naming names, I guess, what approach in some ways could be successful as we move forward?
I think the kind of question of winners and losers in this new environment is often one that's asked. And I think, first of all, assuming that the kind of plans around open APIs rolls out as it's meant, then ultimately the consumer, the customer, the end customer is going to be the real winner. I think in terms of the different categories, we're already...
Yeah, we lost you there for a second there, Kevin. Let's go back to it. Yes, you were just saying winners and losers. Customers will be the winners.
Yeah, so I think if you look at the kind of overall environment, there's no reason that increased collaboration means that the successful businesses can come from different sectors. So the fintechs working with incumbents, etc. I think generally people put up the names of like an Amazon or Google because of the scale, the information they hold on. The data and the financial transactions. But I actually think that you're going to see an increase in those companies that are more agile. We heard this morning about how they need to adapt. But I certainly wouldn't underestimate the incumbents. I think they've got the history there. They've got the data. I think the challenges that they're now facing means they're running at a pace that they've not necessarily done before. And I think even recent changes has created a different attitude. I think now a lot of the established players have got a more can-do attitude and realise some of the things that they believe have held them back, whether it's regulation, whether it's legacy systems. There's examples now where they're breaking through that. So ultimately, I see a pace of change that possibly we haven't seen for many, many years before.
I'll come to you, Matt, in a second. But Marion, actually, I'm aware I haven't spoken to you for a while. I saw you nodding there. That's really interesting. I think this mindset and how it filters through the business is very important. I think the most successful companies that I'm looking at the moment are the ones who allow or actually enable an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think what we have to, that mindset shift, legacy isn't bad. Legacy is part of our ecosystem, the trillions that flows through the banks that are interconnected and with the clearinghouses is fundamental to everything we have. And our priority is making sure that's safe and secure. The key is what Kartik was saying, which is then transitioning and integrating. So we use APIs internally to connect those systems, to aggregate data on a customer who will have multiple accounts or multiple uses. And over a third of banks' customers are multi-bank. So this concept of owning is dated and gone.
Yeah.
And so we use APIs, like I've said, on Payit to help customers, transact, manage their businesses, integrating it, as we're all talking about, with partners, but also using internal. And it's not, challenger versus incumbent. It's about joining forces and creating an ecosystem that's safe and secure, because our enemy here is not each other, it's the fraudsters.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Matt, on that? It's really interesting. There are, again, there are many threats, but one of the biggest threats is actually when the organization itself isn't connected up and isn't able to connect the dots.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of talk about legacy and incumbent banks and challenger banks, and at Curve we've taken the view that banks do a great job and they're very good at looking after your money, and so we've taken a different sort of slant on our sort of attack vector, if you like, which is to create an over-the-top platform which allows you to bank with multiple different incumbents and or challengers, and then sort of wrap that with additional functionality and user experience.
Yeah.
Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, I think.
Well, I was just going to say that the recent moves at the FCA and sort of Wirecard's implosion has sort of shown some of the fragility that exists in this sort of the fintech space at the moment. And so, the faster that fintechs can sort of stand on their own 2 feet and be regulated on, in their own right, the more competitive the landscape will remain.
Yeah. Kartik, we're not talking about end customers all the time. We're talking about business customers, SMEs, and so on, corporate customers. So how can banks use their APIs better to help these types of customers to get involved digitally?
Right. I would like to share a very interesting quote from Citibank CEO in Mobile World Congress, Michael Corbat. He once said, "Citibank is a technology company with a banking license." Yeah. What this means, if you apply this to the API world, so banks should look at providing APIs to SMEs as well. They need to provide tools. They need to not only onboard SMEs into their ecosystem, but enable SMEs to create their own ecosystems, SMEs' own ecosystem. So it's a win-win situation, because it's not just about making your data available as APIs. The question is what use cases it makes it possible to kind of address. Yeah. So opening up APIs of the SMEs will make a huge difference to the end customer. So one of the biggest pain areas of SMEs today is inventory management and making their data available in the ecosystem. So to maximize the value of the ecosystem, it's very important to kind of make the data available in a bi-directional way.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I think, and this is what we do as an organization. Tori Harris Integration Solutions is about integrating SMEs and customers. It's about integrating components in a digital ecosystem.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to talk about this more, because this is what we do as a passion. This is what we do for a living.